Hi everyone and welcome you all, Shadow here, and today I'm bringing you the lowdown on the absolute powerhouse Aria. We are skipping the fluff and diving into why this should be a must build unit if you want to make your life easier in Epic 7. She is one of my most used units due to her ability to excel in a lot of scenarios. We're going to talk about Aria's skills, gear and stats to turn her into a wrecking ball, the best artifacts for her, a deep dive into gameplay tactics, and discuss around some comps or units that will make her your best friend for some of the content this game has to offer. So, without any further ado, let's get into it. Alright, let's talk about Aria's skills and how you can level them up based on your Mola bank. However, I think it's worth mentioning she's one of those units you actually want to have at plus 15, since each skill in her kit is equally important. First up, let's work on her S3. That cooldown reduction is gold for those large battles. When things take longer than expected, we need Aria to swiftly reply buffs, to continue covering the rest of the units and throwing counters at them again. Next in line is her S1. This skill is the one that is going to have most of the action during a battle, mainly when countering. She attacks 2 enemies while having a chance to blind them, 50% when maxed, and increases to 70% when it's not her turn. By upgrading this skill, we actually just want the damage increase on her attacks. Landing the blind debuff is just a nice to have here. Lastly, we need to work on her S2. This will help Aria to increase her crit chance by 30% when maxed. We will talk about this in the upcoming session, but preferably you want her to have 100% crit chance, so take these additional stats into account when building her. You can leave this last, but don't forget to come back and upgrade it as soon as you can. Definitely a huge help when gearing her up. As an added value, when focus is full, she will attack all enemies, dispelling 2 buffs and decreasing combat readiness by 30%. In summary, first finish her S3, then work on her S1, and, last but not least, get done with her S2. Coming up, builds and stats. I consider Aria a difficult unit to build if you actually want to have a really good one. She kind of needs a lot of stats, and we're going to review which ones are priority and how you can play around with the ones that are not. But first, let's talk about the sets you want to use on her and the different builds we are going to analyze. Let's start with the minimum stats build and the optimal one. Both require the lifesteal set. This one is being used by 95% of the players here in Epic 7. Regarding the 2 set pieces, if you want to min-max stats, you can go with resistance or crit set, but, to be honest, just go with whatever can give you the stats we are going to see in a minute. In other words, you can also consider defense, HP and immunity set. What stats are priority? Those are defense, crit rate and ER. Why? Well, defense because everything around Aria is about that stat. Her damage, her buff, her base defense is also high. We just not want her to stand there and cover everyone, the idea is that she can help with damage too. Crit rate, I would say non-negotiable to have her at 100%, if you can't at the moment, try to make it as close as possible. And, for ER, you want to prevent other units to get rid of her counter buff or reset her before she has her first turn. She can be dead weight until she has S3 again and we want to avoid that. Our next priority involves HP and crit damage. Those 2 can vary a little bit more than the other 3, and this will depend on the build you actually want to have on her. Lastly, speed. Fortunately, this is not a unit that needs to be fast. You can just run a speed boost on her and be done, or a defense percentage boost and get speed in the rest of the pieces, aiming for something between 140 and 150. Both scenarios are fine, go with whatever option gives you the best stats. Now that we have established these priorities, let's see how that looks into numbers. I'm going to include a damage comparison between builds, hoping it helps you decide which one you would like to pursue. I'm sharing 2 scenarios of Aria attacking 2 units with different defenses, but the difference in damage between the builds should remain almost the same no matter the defense of the unit she is attacking. First, we have the minimum stats build. As you can see in the table, you want around 1.9k defense, 100 ER, between 14 and 15k HP, and as close as you can or want to 250 crit damage. With this, you should be able to perform well in most of the content. What this build is going to do is just give you enough sustain to deal with the other units slowly. Next, we have the optimal build. And as you can see, there's just a slight increase in the defense and ER stats, but we're aiming to push more into HP and crit damage. Why these changes? The increase in the ER will allow us to use other artifacts besides Bastion of Hope, but I'm going to look more into this in the next section. We need more HP to handle more or bigger hits, and the crit damage will help to make fights just a little bit shorter and get rid of DPS units faster. I used to have this type of build when I was doing top 3 guild wars and legend arena climbing, and let me tell you, it was very useful, especially for those traps that people tend to set in their defenses. With this new build, you should be doing 12% more damage compared to the previous one. What I did for this calculation was use crit damage of 240 for the first build and 260 for the second one. The last build I want to bring to the table has a very specific purpose: wipe the other team as soon as possible. It's useful to me for arena top 30 climb. I have used it against top 20 guilds in Guild Wars 2. Is it completely safe? No, but I can confirm it has a very high win rate, otherwise I would have just changed it already. I think this build is nearly impossible to get in lifesteal. If you can get it somehow, that's really great, but for those who can't, go with the Speed of Destruction set and whatever 2 set pieces give you the stats we are looking for. Since we are losing the sustained lifesteal was giving us, this option requires a little bit more of team planning to protect her with mitigation and sustain properly. Anyways, here's the build. As you can see, you reduce your HP to get more crit damage. The damage output compared to the first build is 30% higher, and this is why the purpose of this stat line. But again, just use this build if you want to speed run through battles or if you actually don't farm Banshee at all. Here's the Aria I'm currently using and have been for several months now. I don't see myself moving back to lifesteal yet. Aria is a unit that could be using 2 or 3 artifacts depending on the situation, playstyle, or build you have on her. My personal favorite, and the one most people use, is Fairy Tail for a Nightmare. We not only have another chance to disable buffs from the opponent when counter-attacking, but also we are doing fixed damage. Why is fixed damage so useful on her? Besides making good damage, you have another way to deal with evasion units, and this is very important, since they can be troublesome for Aria if they are on the field for a long period of time. So, even if you miss the hit, you can count that you will be doing the amount of fixed damage mentioned in the artifact, in this case 1500 if it's maxed. Another option we have for her is Bastion of Hope. You can use this if you are lacking ER, if you feel you are going against a debuffer with a huge amount of effectiveness, or just if you want to play safe and make sure no one can dispel your buffs. Besides this, there is actually no other reason to use this artifact, since you should be building Aria with a decent amount of ER. This can easily be substituted by pairing her with Christie for specific content like Guild Wars or Arena, but we're going to discuss this in the next section. What about Scroll of Shadows? I would say use this only if you don't have another Fairy Tail for Aria or if your Scroll of Shadows has a higher level. Let's forget about the chance to flick a random debuff on the enemy, since you really don't need this. It's a nice to have, but not a conditional to actually make Aria useful. Let's focus on the damage instead. Assuming both artifacts are maxed, these artifacts provide a 60% of increase in the damage dealt and Fairy Tail 1500 fixed damage. Which artifact does more damage? Overall, Fairy Tail does. The damage on her S2 is close. However, the S1 has a 25% of increase in the damage. This is considering a critical hit. If it's a non-critical hit or a miss one, the difference is actually bigger. Last but not least, it is worth mentioning Book was used a lot when Lua came out, more precisely for Guild Wars. This was another option for Aria to overcome the increased skill cooldown effect and let her use S3 immediately after using Soulborn with S1 first, when there was no Valiant of course. I don't think Book is used that much anymore though. Now, let's deep dive into the final section of this guide, gameplay and synergies. Aria can be a solid pick in RTA if the opponent's drafts allows it and if it goes with your playstyle too. However, she shines even more in Guild Wars and Arena. The reason is because most of the defenses defined in the current meta can be well managed by her. There are a lot of scenarios we can discuss on how to use Aria properly, but instead, we're going to cover some general rules when using her, based on my experience and the content I have been focusing more so far. As a first move, you always want to open with her S3 and have the buffs up. If you fail the S3 on turn 1, you may want to consider wait for one turn before using it. How can you fail using S3 on turn 1? Number 1, you are silenced. Number 2, you are unable to be buffed. This and the previous point can be prevented by the proper use and speed tuning of a cleanser in your team. Number 3. An ally is unable to be buffed. Most of the times, you want everyone to get the barrier and the steal buffs, but could be very few exceptions in which one unit won't get it and you could ignore that. Just bear in mind, ideally you don't want this to happen that often. And number 4, your skill cooldown increased by the effect of another unit. Not much to do here, get more ER if this happens frequently. If your team and the specific attack you are doing at the moment allow this, I would definitely encourage you to think about how waiting for another turn could actually help in the outcome of the battle. Let's move on to her Soulburn. Using this properly can also be a lifesaver because it can let you either proc S2 in a convenient time, kill a specific unit faster with double S1, or just be ready to use S3 again without wasting any focus counters in the process. Talking about focus, always check the amount of focus you have when soul burning. For example, if you have already 4 focus counters and S3 ready again, most of the times will be a waste to S3 right away. Instead, soul burn S1 first, let S2 proc, and then use S3. Focus counters may vary for each battle since it depends on non-controllable factors like dual attacks, combat readiness manipulation, or the speed of the opponent's units. What about team comps? For Guild Wars, a pre-save comp is formed by a Knight and a Soul Weaver. For Arena, you can add a DPS or a support as your fourth one. If it has low speed, that is even better. For RTA, you can use a similar comp than in Arena. When drafting, consider not including very fast units unless they can hide themselves like Spectre Tenebra, Para, or any ranger guiding light. This to force the other units to continue attacking Aria. Let's talk about knights that can help Aria fulfill her duties smoothly. Christie and Crimson Army are very solid picks. Christie is useful when facing what could possibly be a debuffer with a lot of effectiveness, like Lua, AOL, Knock Wall, and even Rand sometimes. Crimson Army is for mitigation only. It's a really good unit for that role, and the invincible buff is even more useful if you are running the damage build. Unbound Knight AOL can also be considered for this job, since the shield on her S3 can help mitigate some of the hits Aria would be taking. Between these two, go with whoever you feel more comfortable with or has better gear. Now, some may ask, if Christie is a good pair, would Silvertail Christie perform as good as she? My answer is yes, but, sadly, you will need to make some adjustments or just be careful about certain points. First, do not activate the increased effectiveness and provoke chance runes, since you still want units to hit Aria and not Christie. Second, if you already have those activated and don't want to reset runes or make another Christie, just make sure to use Christie's S1 on a unit that has high ER or AA attacks on their kit. This way, you won't interfere with Aria's role. Third, the increase in the combat readiness by an additional 5%, which can sound not a lot, can actually make a difference depending on your builds. So, just watch out and rebuild accordingly if your turns become a little bit messy. What do I mean by this? In Guild Wars, you should be fine, since your 3 units should have high ER. But, for RTA and Arena, you still want your cleanser go before Aria, in case your 4th unit can't be buffed. If this combat readiness increase is making Aria go before the cleanser by a little, or is subject to speed RNG, the team may not work all the time for her, especially against units like AOL, that is a regular unit in the meta with the unbuffable debuff and most of the times with high effectiveness. In this case, just adjust if necessary, whether you decide to make Aria a little bit slower or increase the speed of your cleanser. Talking about cleansers, I find my Chloe and Destina really great overall. Both not only can heal more than one unit with one skill, but have revive on their S3, which can be very useful when things are getting a little bit tough. I tend to use Destina more when I feel I will be needing more healing, and make Chloe when I find her attack buff more useful and can manage battle without too much healing. When on lifesteal set, and depending on the 4th unit, you can risk it and forget about the healing to bring someone like Mediator Kagoric. Bear in mind that you will need to come up with a team that can deal with the other team as soon as possible, since there is no healing besides Aria's self-sustain and your ally's support skills, whatever you choose those to be. Leaving Guild Wars out of this, for the 4th unit you can choose a DPS or support unit. Can you bring another Soul Weaver or tank? The short answer is yes, but is it the best option? For RTA, could be, depending on the other's draft. For Arena, not really, since here you can have more control over the other team, therefore, more time to think about who you want to bring. Here we have a lot of options to choose from. As an advice, choose someone that is relatively slow or any other unit that can cover themselves from being targeted. You want this unit to provide an overall advantage against the other team, or make sure it has any particular way to address a unit Aria could have some troubles from time to time. Here are some examples of units you could be pairing with Aria so you can get an idea for your teams. And there you have it. We have gone through a lot of reasons about why she's a very strong unit capable of making some of the content easy. Give her some of your best gear if you want her to excel. As we conclude this guide, I invite you to express your thoughts in the comment section below. Your feedback is very important to me for my continuous improvement. If you found this content valuable, please consider liking this video, subscribing for more guides, and activating the notification bell to stay informed on future releases. Thanks for watching, and until the next one, see ya!